The Football World Cup's the biggest sporting event in the world, and you can keep up with the play with me, Jason Pine, and my good mate and former All-White David Choate on Football Fever. Listen daily throughout the World Cup as we bring you all the action from Qatar. Choate and I love football. We can't wait for the World Cup to get underway. So join us as we live through all the goals, all the drama, all the glory. Download Football Fever from iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. Let's talk some football. England v France tomorrow morning in the Football World Cup quarterfinals. This is the quarterfinal I think that a lot of people, even those who don't really follow football closely, are perhaps taking more than a passing interest in. I think we've always had a bit of an allegiance to football in England, and we wonder how they'll go at major tournaments. They are into the quarterfinals where they take on the powerhouse that is France. This will be a massive challenge for England tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock kickoff on Sky Sport. I want to bring in a highly regarded football journalist by the name of Seb Stafford-Bloor out of Tifo Football, based in Germany, but covers the England football team and joins us now on Weekend Sport. Seb, it's great to get the chance to get to chat to you and get your expertise and insight and analysis. Before we look at the game tomorrow in particular, what have you made of England overall at this tournament so far?
Jason, I think it's been kind of typical of previous tournaments in the sense that they've moved quite efficiently through the tournament without necessarily being that impressive. They had some good moments. Obviously, they started very well against a distracted Iranian team, then had that quite odd game against United States of America, in which they looked like they'd been sort of athletically overpowered a little bit, and they played in a very conservative way, and as if their focus was really on not conceding rather than actually scoring any goals. And then they played pretty well against Wales, and this has been a kind of a theme with Gareth Southgate in that you do what's necessary to progress through the rounds, and style be damned, essentially. And they're fine, fair enough, because one of the great weaknesses of English teams in the past has been failure to progress through tournaments. So it's hard to argue with, although I suppose back in England, you'll never quite get away from the idea that they want both, progress and style and flourish. And England are gifted with a lot of very expressive, talented attacking players. And if you play a conservative style, sorry, that is an email coming through to me, you will inevitably get a little bit of criticism from people who say that you're not quite using your resources to their maximum. So it's been good. The Senegal game was very efficient, save the first half an hour when Senegal played very, very well. And then it appeared as if they ran out of steam a little bit. Senegal were missing a few crucial players, particularly in Idrissa Gueye and Sadio Mane at the beginning of the tournament. But England did everything they needed to do, and they've been good. They look good.
All right, so here we are into the quarterfinals against France. How much of England coach Gareth Southgate's preparation for this game against France will be based on stopping Kylian Mbappe?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you'd be crazy not to prepare for him. On the other hand, what do you do? It's a little bit like, preparing to face Jonah Lomu, isn't it? Like, you can have a plan and that's all good, but what do you do with the most dominant player in the sport? Like, honestly, and so I think there will be a kind of a halfway house between respecting what Mbappe is, which is a player who cannot be contained one-on-one. That's the Lomu comparison. You just can't do it, right? So you need to bend your system around him. I think England will go to a back three, play Kyle Walker on the outside as a centre-back, and then put Kieran Trippier in there just to block up that area a little bit. At the same time, however, I think Southgate will be mindful that one of France's weaknesses has been down their own right-hand side, because Jules Koundé has been playing there, but he's not really a fullback. He's a centre-back. He's a very, very good player, but he's not a natural fullback. And he'll want to make sure that England don't just sit in a low block or anything like that for the entire game, purely based on what Mbappe can do. That being said, I think the French team's strength go beyond that. And Mbappe is their best player, but I've been hugely impressed by Antoine Griezmann this tournament. I think his role in that kind of orchestrating, I suppose you call it a kind of number 8/number 10 role, he's been terrific. Olivier Giroud has broken the French goal scoring record. Aurélien Tchouameni, the Real Madrid player, has I suppose, stepped into that kind of Kante role and done extremely well. And Adrien Rabiot, like, I know he had a terrible time in the European Championship and suffered a lot of criticism, and there's a lot of controversy around his role on the side and his mother's views around his role on the side, that kind of stuff. That was pretty difficult, but he's come back, man. He's had a great tournament, and they are loaded as a side, and no question about it, they're favourites. So I don't know what Gareth Southgate does really. You can get. I suppose Mbappe is one of those guys who can bewitch you in the sense that he's so talented that you can worry all about him and forget about the world-class players across the rest of the pitch. I mean, we haven't even mentioned Ousmane Dembele. I mean, he's one of the most destructive ball carriers in world football, and he had not such a great second half of the opening bit of the season, but he's had a very good year overall. And that we're sort of not really bothered about him. That's kind of speaks to Mbappe's impact at this World Cup, I think.
Absolutely, it does. Everything I've read and listened to and seen, Seb, talks about how England are going to stop France. How are they going to stop Mbappe? How are they going to stop France? Is there any school of thought that England should actually flip this and take the game to France? And the second part of that question is would England fans actually like to see that?
Great point. Yes and yes, because I think, well, as we've said, like, you can worry about Mbappe and then you have to play against him. Okay. So in my mind, all of England's strengths, and I think a lot of people would say the same, a lot of England's strengths lie at the top of the pitch. Defence this is not a golden era of England centre backs. This is not when, they were choosing between a kind of an array of like Sol Campbell and Rio Ferdinand and John Terry and Ledley King. They're not in that position. And so kind of focusing on what you can do with an attack that kind of starts with Jude Bellingham, I guess, is definitely the way forward. Also, I would say that you can, the French centre halves, I expect Rafa Varane and Daim Picano will start on Saturday night. Both excellent players, but both have a mistake in them. And you'd back Harry Kane, you'd back Bukayo Saka, these players to cause them difficulties. And so naturally there's a kind of a temptation to stress what England can do in those areas. I hope that's the case, because I completely agree with you. I think it's a more productive way to go. But I think based on what's happened in the past with England, it seems unlikely. England's big failings in these kind of games, Jason, has been to occasionally take the lead in them or start well and then start worrying about what happens next. So I always think of that 2018 World Cup semi-final when England were the better team by a long way in the first half an hour, took the lead, had a chance to go 2-0 up, and then something happened. It seemed like an emotional response to it. It's like, oh my goodness, we might be in a World Cup final in a few days. And then all of a sudden, Modric and Rakitic and Kovacic and, well, I think Brozovic played that day, but they took control, and England were on this kind of terrible passing carousel, which had eventually led to their defeat. And the same happened against Italy in the Euros final. Like, took the lead with a better team, could have gone 2-0 up, were far superior for half an hour. And then all of a sudden, that thing, I don't even know how you describe it, but that kind of, even an inferiority happened where the emphasis becomes on stopping what the opposition can do. So you'd hope for an aggressive performance. I think we expect a pragmatic one. And not sure how that will go, but we'll see.
I guess we'll see when it plays out. You mentioned, Seb, there, Jude Bellingham, this teenage sensation, the next big thing they're talking about in English football. He's captured plenty of attention at this tournament. He's playing his club football at the moment anyway in Germany, where you're based. Have his performances come as any surprise to you, or is this exactly what you expected from him?
What I personally expected to see from him, because I've had the privilege of watching him for quite a long time now, and I see him every week. Got to see him play live in person a few times, which has been a real privilege. I think for England fans, this is kind of a first glimpse of. There's always a thing in England about the Bundesliga in the sense that no one's quite sure how strong it is. And obviously, we're coming off the back of a couple of years where Jadon Sancho had a terrific start to his career at Borussia Dortmund and then has not really delivered at Manchester United. And so that's created a suspicion around people who've made their name there. Bellingham has been fabulous. And I think a lot of people, I'll go even further to say that actually a lot of people have really fallen for him in the sense that Bellingham is he's a delightful young man. in an interview. When you speak to him, he's a very sincere, mature person for 19. But obviously on the pitch, I think England, over the years, England had a lot of talented players. They haven't had a lot of talented players who, when they play for England, remain uninhibited, who aren't bothered about the pressures that come with playing for England, who aren't thinking about what the headlines are going to look like the next morning if they make a mistake. Bellingham couldn't possibly care less about any of that, and it shows. And his performances have been really excellent. And I think obviously the peak of those were came against Senegal when he was kind of the decisive factor in that game. But I think, Jason, I think a bit of credit is due to Gareth Southgate, because at Borussia Dortmund, Jude Bellingham sometimes falls into the trap of trying to do a bit too much, because Dortmund are not a great side at the moment, and their midfield is a little bit imbalanced. And so what you get as a result of that is a player who tries to kind of fill every midfield position. Whereas at England, he gets to play with, I think on Saturday it'll be Declan Rice and Jordan Henderson. So European Cup winning captain of Liverpool, and Rice is a very, very good player, really strong 8 out of 10 player. And that gives him the license to just focus on what he can do and how he can be destructive. And I think that's been one of the keys. But clearly a coming talent in world football. And it's really nice to see. I have this thing where, because I live in Germany and I'm a German football fan, I get a bit annoyed by that Bundesliga tax thing. So when you see a guy come through and just be as good as advertised, it's kind of satisfying, right? It's the anti-Sancho effect. It's the Erling Haaland thing, where he comes and just ruins leagues.
Yeah, they're certainly doing that. And who else is crucial for England in this game, Seb?
Kane. Always Kane. Because whether he's scoring goals or whether he's just the hinge around which the attack operates, England don't really exist in an attacking sense without Harry Kane. And he's only scored once in the tournament. But then actually, if you go back through some of his moments, I think of the ball he put round the corner for, I think it was Bukayo Saka in the first game. That sort of it's just his range of attacking abilities, Jason, is so extravagant. I don't remember another England player who could operate as a playmaker but operate also as a world-class goal scorer at the same time. And I think that if you're existing between a midfield of Rabiot and Tchouaméni and in front of a defence like Varane and probably Upamecano, the key to England finding space in that whole system is going to be where Kane receives the ball and what he does with it. Kane, to me, I'm also a Spurs fan, so I've seen a lot of Kane over the years. And to me, his greatest asset is actually his mind, because he sees opportunity very, very quickly. And that could be when he receives the ball 40 yards from goal right up against the touchline. Right, Kane has that ability just to knife across field, to the other side of the pitch to a fullback, or to put a wide forward in. His relationship with Son Heung-min is obviously what matters at club level. But I think you can see shades of Son in Saka, in Raheem Sterling, in Marcus Rashford. Rashford's playing some excellent football, and I'm part of that is because of Kane. A lot of that is to do with Rashford, of course, and his career's reclamation, but. Him playing well makes a huge difference. It really does. Because also I think that if you are going to go to a back 3/5, you're going to have to sacrifice a forward player, and you're going to play with a 2 rather than a 3. If that's the case, the emphasis on Kane is enormous. We also think in England that we're unsure if Raheem Sterling is going to play because he's experienced some personal issues. His house has been burgled, and he's been allowed to leave the camp to go back to England. Spend some time with the family. Quite rightly, it's much more important than football. Still unclear, as and when we speak now on Wednesday, as to whether he's actually going to return or not. So it's going to be Rashford or Saka probably alongside him, and that puts a huge emphasis on Kane's performance.
Indeed it does. Seb, I feel like we could chat all day about this, but time is against us, unfortunately. Thanks so much for joining us across New Zealand, though. Seb Stafford-Bloor from Tifo Football, with his thoughts on how England can break down France tomorrow morning. Second of the quarterfinals tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock on Sky Sport.
Deep underground, the Jelly Belly factory, Bibi is in her secret laboratory creating the weird and wild flavours of Bean Boozled.
I've done it again!
Is it cappuccino or liver and onions? Dare to compare. Bean Boozled, 6th edition. Are you brave enough?